Hey everybody, this is Brian Lewis from Inscriber Magazine. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian A. Lewis, BRYANALUIS. Here we're talking about the LSU coaching situation. The coaching carousel begins awfully early for the Tigers. This time around, as Les Miles, the man who replaced Nick Saban, got fired after a loss to Auburn last night in probably the most controversial way, because I honestly thought that when a team commits a penalty, that the clock stops. But I guess it doesn't work that way. I'm not going to really go any further. I don't really care for Auburn. My brother's an LSU fan, so I kind of respect LSU, but that's about it. So I have some names here for you. The index card, wrote some names down. Coaching candidates for LSU. Let's go over the ones that I just don't think are going to happen. Number one, David Shaw from Stanford. First of all, David Shaw would be the absolute worst hire for Stanford anyway, out of all the big names, because his offense is a pro style. You don't want to run a pro style in today's SEC. You know, you have A&M, you have Bama, you have Florida's on their way. Florida is going to be a team that's going to burst out in the scene pretty soon. Tennessee could score a lot of points. You look at what South Carolina's building with Brandon McElwain there. In time, they'll be pretty good. So you need to actually be able to score. So I'm going to eliminate him because I also think that David Shaw will be coaching in the NFL next year. His style fits the NFL a lot better, even though I think he'll probably be with the Colts, and that'll be an utter and complete disaster. The second name is former LSU offensive coordinator Jimbo Fisher. I don't see any way plausible at the moment that Jimbo Fisher would leave Florida State for LSU. I, in my opinion, think that Florida State is a better job. Now, that's a debate that I'd be glad to have with anybody. I just don't think Jimbo Fisher's in a position to leave because of, one, that contract, two, the fact that you're in Florida, and three, why the hell is he leaving the ACC to go to the SEC? You know, you can basically, at worst, finish second or third in the ACC every year, or you can go to LSU and potentially finish sixth or seventh on a mediocre year. So just some food for thought. Bobby Petrino is not leaving Louisville. No questions asked. I'm not even going to debate that. He left for Arkansas. He has a bad reputation in the SEC. Let's not even go there. And then Tom Herman from Houston, because I don't see Houston really, I don't see Tom Herman leaving Houston. I think he'd be crazy after that recruiting class that he brought in last year. So with that being said, those four are out of the way. Here are, 5, 6 candidates out there, and I want to mention some of the mid-major schools because I do think that some of the mid-major schools have a lot of talent, and I do think if you're LSU, you have to look for an offensive-minded coach, especially when you have Danny Etling at quarterback and Brandon Harris still there. And, of course, you're going to have to replace Leonard Fournette, but they might already have that in Geis. Geis is pretty good. And, you have all this wide receiver talent, all these athletes, and yet you cannot score points. So let's stick to offensive-minded coaches here, guys. Jeff Brom from Western Kentucky. And I really like what Brandon Doughty was able to do at Western Kentucky. Now, keep in mind that, yeah, he's in his third year as a coach there. He really prospered. And I'll tell you what, man. Western Kentucky is not having that much of a drop-off. Granted, they lost to Bama, but everyone loses to Bama. So that's just some food for thought. The guy can put some points on the board. Doc Holloway from Marshall, very respectable head coach. I don't know if he leaves Marshall. I don't know if LSU would be interested, but he'd be an interesting name to bring out there. Brian Harsin from Boise. I absolutely despise Chris Peterson. I thought Chris Peterson was a guy who let his players get away with way too much. Brian Harsin has actually brought some discipline to that program. And I really like Rippon. Rippon's a hell of a player, and I think if his history developing that quarterback could actually lean in and help Danny Etling and Brandon Harris out. And you have to be able to score points. And Brian Harsin and the Boise State Broncos do that. And I don't know if Boise is going to be allowed to actually compete on a high level because they're getting kind of blackballed by the Pac-12 and the Big 12 right now, as well as BYU. Willie Taggart from South Florida, that's a name that they're out there because I think LSU may want to value the Florida recruiting pipeline more than Texas. Food for thought. I think he's a pretty decent coach of South Florida. I think he's actually achieved exactly what is expected of him. Maybe LSU helps him out. But here are the 3 names that I'm going to circle in on, and I'm going to focus on for the next 2 minutes, okay? Number 3, I know it's a long shot, a name that probably nobody's mentioning, but I love this guy, is Dana Holgerson from West Virginia, I apologize, the Mountaineers in the Big 12. And, West Virginia's been very competitive in the Big 12, believe it or not. I mean, granted, I think their fans are a little obnoxious, but I think, they've had they've had their success. I mean, Dana Holgerson, obviously, nurturing Geno Smith. Obviously, his career hasn't really ended up too well in the NFL. But Dana Holgerson can actually put points on the board. Remember, he developed Tavon Austin, Stedman Bailey, and some of these other offensive weapons. I think LSU, him in the SEC, would be almost like Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M. It was a risk, but you score a lot of points. And you have to remember, Kevin Sumlin came from Conference USA before he went to Texas A&M. So let's keep that in mind also. Number 2, Ed Orgeron, who is currently the interim head coach. I would put him as a top candidate in my mind if it wasn't for the next man I'm about to name. But Ed Orgeron, what he did at USC shouldn't be slept on. That season, I thought USC really achieved more than they did with Lane Kiffin and more than they have with Steve Sarkisian and Clay Helton since. It almost looks like Ed Orgeron knew what he was doing. I mean, the guy coached at Ole Miss, so he has some recruiting ties to the state of Mississippi. That's always good, especially with Ole Miss possibly getting some really severe sanctions and Mississippi State not really being, not being able to catch up to where they were during the DAC era. So that's something. You can get Mississippi there. And, Ed Orgeron, very well respected in the West Coast as well at USC. So you might be able to get some Cali kids. And you know how LSU is with their athletes. They love recruiting athletes. Number 1, I think this guy's a slam dunk. I was just telling my brother about this guy. His former Baylor head coach, Art Briles. Yes, I understand for you PC folks, I get it, okay? The sexual assault cases at Baylor are a very serious matter. But I don't necessarily blame Art Briles. I blame the administration because Baylor's not the only school that has this problem. Stanford has this problem. A lot of small private schools in Massachusetts have this problem. The college I attended had this problem. The problem is with the sexual assault cases, you get a bunch of rich, spoiled, entitled brats, and that's what happens. And Art Briles kind of fell victim to that. And it's kind of sad. But I'll tell you what about Art Briles. Art Briles can put points on the board. Granted, his offense is some of the most Mickey Mouse stuff I have ever seen, but you can't argue the results. You look at all the injuries they had last year, and Art Briles was able to actually win with a 4th-string quarterback. LSU can't even win with a 5-star quarterback. So, here's my overtake. Between those 3, I think Holgerson's number 3. Orgeron would be my number 2 right now, and if you can get Art Briles cleared of all that bullcrap in Baylor, he'd be my higher. But it'd be between Orgeron and Holgerson right now, because I think Orgeron brings a new mentality that they had with Saban that they lacked with Les Miles, despite the national championships, berths at least. And then you have Ed Orgeron, who has some SEC experience. And then you have, Holgerson, who's in the Big 12. West Virginia really is in no man's land, and the Big 12 really has no future in terms of what they're going to freaking do as a conference. So you could sell that to Holgerson, and you might be able to recruit in Texas, because Holgerson actually is respected among coaches in Texas. So it really depends on what direction they want to go. If you want to win Florida LSU, stick to the coaches in the SEC East and the ACC. If you want to try and recruit in Texas, which would be my plan, stick with Holgerson, Briles, or Orgeron. And all this and more at the Inscriber magazine. You can follow us. I'll leave the link below. And, of course, follow me on Twitter, at Brian A. Lewis, BryanALuis. I appreciate the follow. Let's have the debate. Who do you want, LSU fans, as your next head coach? Have a great night, guys.